Hey all, this is Reddit Tosker. Today we're doing an analysis on the official Trailer 3 for Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We're going to talk about all the things that are interesting about it, and then speculate on all the interesting things we see. First though, before we talk about the trailer, let's talk about the changes made to the website. More functionality and information was added to the official Tears of the Kingdom website, with two additions standing out in particular. Number one is confirmation that Link starts off in the sky, which is not that much of a surprise. Many people have speculated on the internet that this sky area would be our tutorial area. It would be our Great Plateau equivalent. So that's not a surprise at all, but it serves as confirmation. Second thing revealed in the website is the ascend ability. It states that there'll be certain monsters that you can ascend through as well. I think that means that stone taluses are probably going to get a surprise in this game. But I doubt the functionality will be limited to just the stone talus. There will probably be other monsters that are large that you'll be able to do it to, so that'll be fun. There's also a Japanese website, and the Japanese website seems to have more information than the English one, having text for World, Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf. Someone on Twitter reached out to me with translations of these texts, which I will relay to you now. Keep in mind though that I don't speak Japanese, so I can't guarantee the accuracy of these translations. For the world section it says, "The castle ascends into the air as mysterious clusters of ruins rain down from the sky. Hyrule has been suddenly struck by a cataclysm. Link, the main character, must plunge himself into his never-ending adventures once again. Link, the hero who once saved Hyrule. Taking full advantage of his right hand's ability, he must face the strange events occurring in Hyrule. Zelda, the intelligent and deeply curious princess of the kingdom of Hyrule. She finds herself caught up in the cataclysm that befalls Hyrule. Ganondorf, he came into being as the sole male born once every 100 years to the Gerudo, a race comprised of only females. It appears he is connected to the cataclysm that has befallen Hyrule in some way." So what's interesting about this, if accurate, is that it suggests that Link and Zelda don't really know anything about Ganondorf, which makes sense, since their information on a Ganondorf is probably limited, since they've been dealing with Calamity Ganon for the last 10,000 years. The Japanese website also shows a better look at the new towers that we haven't really gotten a good look at yet. Alright, let's move on to the actual trailer. The trailer starts and you can see a wide variety of sky islands. It then shows a blue Chew fighting a Zonai construct. It then shows Link going downward, passing the sky island that we've seen before, which is interesting because that implies that he's jumping off from a much higher place, from a Sky Island location that we haven't seen yet, probably. As Link passes down, we get to see what's behind this structure that we've seen many times. There we see a circular stone area, with a stone altar in the center. And this is notable because at the very end of the trailer you see Zelda at that very same location. When she asks Link to find her, she's standing next to the stone altar. And that's strange because where this altar is, where this structure is, this whole island is the Great Plateau area. Most likely. And I doubt that we're going to meet Zelda immediately after beating the tutorial area. And so for this reason and others that I'll point out throughout the trailer, I'm now a believer in the time travel theory. I think Zelda's stuck in the past, there's time travel shenanigans going on around here. Moving on, as Link is falling, you can see more of these malice-gooped holes on the ground. They're quite distinctive, so I'm assuming that you're going to be able to go there and clear them out somehow. Next we see Hateno Village, and it seems to be covered in mushrooms, or more likely mushroom-looking buildings. There's a shop there, with the icon looking like a suit of armor with a mushroom hat. And on top of the building is what looks like a suit of armor with a mushroom hat. And some of the villagers are wearing mushroom-themed clothing, staring at this shop, which I think means that you're going to be able to buy mushroom-themed gear here, and probably also mushrooms. Next you see Link walking by a bunch of newly erected tents at the fountain near Castletown. There's no people there, so maybe the presence of the tents means you can build a village in this area, like Terrytown. It looks like the kind of place you could build up and fortify. There might be like one NPC in this tent that you can't see the inside of, and do quests for him to bring more people in and more materials and build up the place, perhaps. Next we get a shot of Link climbing near Kakariko Village, and we see more clearly the circular thing that was in a previous area. This is probably just Zonai building stuff from the Sky Islands that has fallen here. And you also get a close look at this Zonai Shrine. I'm just going to call them Zonai Shrines. It's not confirmed, but I'd be stunned if they're not just Zonai Shrines. I'm positive that they're just shrines. The only difference is that you're going to go in there and it'll have green stuff instead of blue stuff. They're just shrines. Now here you get a shot of Link running, and there's not much here that's noticeable, or notable, except right here, on top of this pillar, there looks like there's a stump, like those stumps for Korok seed gathering. It's not a guarantee, but this might imply Korok seeds are in the game. Now here, this is interesting. A building rises out of the desert, and it looks like it's of significant size, possibly a dungeon. I had a podcast with, I believe, Hyrule Gamer a while ago, and one of the things he mentioned was that he wanted the Arbiter's Grounds to rise up from the desert and be a dungeon. The Arbiter's Grounds are an area in Twilight Princess, and we know that it's the same area because there's a place called the Arbiter's Grounds also in Breath of the Wild, implying that the dungeon's still there, it's just buried. So he, and also I, would be extremely happy to find out that that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing some portion of the old Arbiter's Grounds coming up and be explorable. And even if it's not the Arbiter's Ground, I'd be happy if this is some kind of cool dungeony building. Next we see a lot of stuff falling from the sky, a lot of sky islands falling, pieces, and Hyrule Castle rising from the ground. And then you see a bunch of Sheikah on a hill looking at it from a distance. This looks like it's the Cataclysm moment described in the Japanese website. And then we get an incredible shot of what looks like Demise. Now this isn't necessarily Demise. This could just be Ganondorf having powered up in some moment, and in this powered up state his appearance is supposed to invoke Demise, without necessarily him being Demise itself. Demise's personality should be dead. It was sealed away and dissipated in Skyward Sword, and he only really lives on in his incarnations, like Ganondorf. But Ganondorf is his own person, he's not being controlled by Demise, and none of them have ever been controlled by Demise. Now there's also a chance for it to be Demise. I'm not 100% either way, because I do think there are time travel shenanigans going on, and if Demise wasn't fully dead, he would need to be released by having the Master Sword be completely destroyed, because what remained of his essence was in the Master Sword dissipating. So if it didn't dissipate, and that is actually Demise in full control, then yeah, the Master Sword being destroyed would be required. At the moment, I'm just going to say that that's still Ganondorf, and it only looks like Demise to allude to Demise. But I'm also open to Demise reincarnating, because that's also cool. Okay, next they show Zelda falling and Link jumps after her. As she falls, she starts glowing in a golden light, and a lot of it is focused on her hand, implying something happens to her before she falls, before she hits the ground. Now later on in the trailer, we see Zelda holding a yellow stone that looks like a tear. I'm assuming that this is one of the 7 tears of the kingdom that is shown in the mural. This stone has a glyph on it, and that glyph looks a lot like the symbol for recall. So what I think happened, Zelda was down there investigating with Link, and she found that tear down there, and she picked it up, and it's in her hand. And so when she fell, she activated the recall rune, and is sent to the past. Really far into the past. In one of the trailers it shows Link with a golden light thing orb there. And he seems to be standing behind that structure in front of that stone altar I keep mentioning. And he seems to be handing his broken Master Sword to the golden light orb. What if they're both standing in the same spot here because they're talking to each other, they can communicate through time, and Link is handing Zelda the Master Sword so she can repair it in the past. And that's why you see her later in the trailer holding the Master Sword, in a healed form, a completed Master Sword. Now, I realize there's holes in this theory. I think maybe I've seen Link use the broken Master Sword in a trailer. I don't remember anymore. But the fact that Link is standing in front of this altar that Zelda was also standing in front of in the latest trailer, and he's talking to some kind of golden orb and he's handing it the Master Sword, it makes too much sense to me. I think this is the moment that Link gets the recall ability. It's after the Great Plateau tutorial in the sky. And here he gets to talk to Zelda and get some context for what's happening. Alright, moving on, we see a bunch of sinkholes in the desert. I'm hoping that you can jump in, either that there's like an antlion monster in those sinkholes, or you can jump into them and they'll drag you down into the underworld part of this Gerudo Desert area. Also, we get a really clear shot of a Zonai Shrine here on the right. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that the Zonai Shrines either have the swirl or they don't have the swirl on them. I think the ones that have the swirl are unactivated Zonai Shrines. That way you can see them from a distance, they're distinctive, you can track them and find them and get to them. And once you activate them, the swirl disappears, and it looks like here you can see the entrance. Next we see the most exciting shot in the trailer. A large cavernous underground area with a lot of lava, Link's wearing the fireproof lava thing, and in the middle a giant structure with a lot of rails on them for minecarts and maybe shield surfing on top of. And this whole location looks to me like the dungeon equivalent. This is the dungeon replacement that we're going to be getting in Tears of the Kingdom. And I'm all for it. It looks great. The best thing about it is that it holds the implication that there'll be different themed biomes for the different dungeons. If there's a lava-esque dungeony location, cavern, then maybe there'll be one with water, one in the desert, each with a different visual aesthetic, and hopefully maybe its own musical theme to go along while you're exploring in there. Next you see a bunch of storm ships, possibly in that big tornado location that we've seen in previous trailers. And then we see Link engaging in some kind of traversal puzzle using water bubbles in the Sky Islands. And then Link is going down a large hole in the ground with lasers and stuff, possibly being another dungeon. Like, this definitely seems like dungeon-y type behavior, as part of a dungeon or leading up to a dungeon. Next, Link is manipulating a large sphere in the Sky Island area. You can also see a dispenser for probably those same water things that we've seen before. This is all probably part of a large, elaborate traversal puzzle for Sky Island exploration, which is great, and I'm fine with that. Then you see what looks like a Zonai labyrinth. And then the shot cuts to a bunch of villagers fighting some monsters. Link's wielding a Zonai sphere we haven't seen before. And there's a black bokoblin, and he has a trident on his head, which I think is a tier we haven't seen yet. The notable part of this is that there are a bunch of villagers that are fighting off the mobs. I think this location is called Fort Hateno, so there'll probably be some kind of defense minigame to defend locations if Link is around in the area. Or maybe it'll just be a random event. If you see it, you can go in there and help. Now this next shot is interesting. Here, we finally see the Sheikah Slate. It's the new Sheikah Slate that we saw Zelda holding in the artwork. It looks like a Nintendo Switch. We see Link in functioning Sheikah technology, and he's going upward. He's being dragged upward in this Sheikah elevator. But the thing is, the Sheikah Slate is connected by a USB wire to this winch in front of him that's attached to his waist. And this winch is connected to the bottom of the elevator here. And we've seen this winch before. In one of the previous trailers, the part where there's a bunch of guardian grabby hands going around Link, you see that winch in front of him. So I think what happens is those guardians attach the winch to Link, and Link has to attach his Sheikah Slate to it, and it takes him somewhere, but he can't go far away from the spot where he enters. The wire is attached to the bottom of this elevator. So why would the winch be there other than to limit his range of movement? And there's also the matter of the Sheikah Slate. I'm still not convinced that Link holding the Sheikah Slate here means that he is going to be having Sheikah Slate abilities. I still don't think that's the case. Or at least not all the time. We still haven't seen him holding the Sheikah Slate in any other shot, and he doesn't have it on his waist, And the one time we see it functioning, it's connected to this winch. So my current working idea is that there will be select places in the world where Sheikah technology still functions, but it will be limited by stuff like this. If we had constant access to the Sheikah Slate all the time, we'd see it on Link's person somewhere. I'm thinking maybe the Sheikah technology doesn't work normally and needs to be connected to some kind of power source, and that's what this winch is for. That's why the switch is connected to the winch. And even once Link gets to where he's going, he'll have to detach the winch once he's done exploring, or something like that. Either way, I'm still not buying that Link will have access to stasis and magnesis and all that stuff. If for no other reasons, then I think Nintendo wants to reduce our movement options we had before. I don't think they want us to be able to stasis a tree and use that tree to traverse large distances. I'm assuming they want us to use their new Ultra Hand vehicles and stuff to get through environmental puzzles. Like you saw in that trailer, you could just use the boat to go across the water. But a lot of people just wouldn't do that if they could just stasis a tree, cling to it, and then get across the water that way. So I'm definitely thinking that one of Nintendo's goals is to restrict the range of movement options that we had in Breath of the Wild thanks to stasis and the bombs. Okay, next we see what might be a Zonai. This character looks like the guy that we saw in the mural in one of the previous trailers. And a notable thing about him is that he has a closed Sheikah eye in front of his head. He's also looking damaged. He has malice burns all over his body. And you can see malice particles in the atmosphere. Next you see a boss Zonai thing in what looks like a very dark area, maybe that underground section that we saw before. Then you see Link in Hyrule Castle's throne room, and it's looking kind of nice. Now, even though I'm a time travel proponent, I'm not sure that this is a case of time travel. In fact, I'm sure that it's not. If only because of all these sparkles. This looks like a cutscene to me. Like, this looks like a after you restore it manually sparkle effect. I am assuming that once you are able to clear Hyrule Castle and bring it back down to the ground, Ganondorf's not going to be there. That's, he's not there for sure. So when you bring it back down to the ground, you'll have the option to restore it normally. Like you'll probably need to bring it a bunch of resources and personnel, stuff like that. And maybe it's a place for the villagers to live. And then when it's fully restored, this cutscene plays with all the sparkles in the air. Like there would be no need for these sparkles to be there if you just time traveled to the past and you're just walking around and it's all sparkly. No, it wouldn't do that. These sparkles are a representation of your hard work, of you having cleaned it up and restored it. Then you see Zelda in the past, maybe. She's now wearing a dress in front of some unknown Zonai mechanism. And then we see a shot of the Deku Tree and Link grabbing the Master Sword, and you can see Koroks in the background looking at him. Which is weird that they would show that if that is an event that happened in Breath of the Wild. So maybe it's an event that happens in Tears of the Kingdom again somehow, further implying more time travel shenanigans. In the background, you hear what I think is that Zonai that we saw earlier, saying to Zelda that Link and his Master Sword will be their last line of defense. Now, I've looked at this scene a lot of times. I've been staring at this scene a lot of times. I don't trust this guy. He needs to keep his creepy hand off of Zelda's bare shoulder. Before he touches her, she's looking down and her eyes are trembling. Maybe she's scared? And then after she hears Link's name, like recognition seems to go across her face and she looks hopeful. And these might be little blushy lines when she says Link. And she better be thinking of Link when she has those blushy lines and not that creepy hand on her shoulder. Also, you can see the recall tier on Zelda's neck, and this Zonai guy also seems to have a different tier. And at this point, I've gone more than 20 minutes in this video not listening to that song from the trailer, so let's do that again.
Link.
I can't stop listening to that song. That song makes this trailer. Okay, next, Link is on this stone bird. I'm thinking that these stone birds will be in certain locations. You won't be able to fly them anywhere. They'll just go from one place to another place. And it'll be places that would be difficult to reach without this stone bird. So there's probably a lot of areas in the Sky Islands that are either too hard to get to or would require a lot of unintended Ultra Hand fusions to get up there without this stone bird. Then you'll see that Link has fused a Royal Greatsword with a shield, so he can parry while he attacks, I guess. Then you see Link approaching a spinning orb, probably that same orb area that you were inside of before, or something similar. Next you see Link in a cave in what appears to be Death Mountain. It's not clear with this resolution, but in the background, those might be two Goron children looking at you. And you dodged an attack from what looks like a rock spinning at you and charging you, which I think is a Goron. Like if you stop it at this frame, you can kind of see the squishy-er parts of the Goron. And it definitely moves like a Goron, so maybe this is some kind of training ground? Or this Goron has been corrupted, because you can see in this cavern there's a bunch of malice stones in the walls. So maybe this Goron has been infected with it and you need to save him by beating him up first. Or he ate a rock that had malice in it, something like that. Next you see Link flying upwards for some reason, and next to him is the first time you see Link with a companion, and it seems to be Teba's son. I don't remember, his name escapes me at the moment. In the next scene you see what the Zelda team meant when they said that they were influenced by Red Dead Redemption. Link is ferrying a bunch of villagers on a cart that he built with Ultra Hand, and his horse is harnessed to carry them around. Now here in this shot though, I also want to mention, I can't see any Sky Islands. And this isn't the first time. A lot of people have mentioned that there are places where you see Sky Islands and then later in other trailers, you don't see them there. They're not there. So either Sky Islands come during different points in the game, they can be summoned, or it's further evidence for time travel theory. Whatever the reason, sometimes there are Sky Islands places and sometimes there's not. Then he uses Ultra Hand on a Octorok projectile, and then you see he has attached a rocket to his shield and is using it to fly upwards. And this next shot's interesting. He is in an area that seems to have anti-gravity particles around. I don't think the anti-gravity particles have anything to do with those Zonai stones, because he's jumping over here and he's still in this anti-gravity area. I think it's these blue particles you see in the air. And he's jumping off into this large waterfall type area. Maybe he can go up the waterfall with the Zora gear, or something like that. Maybe he can recall the waterfall and make it flow backwards, and he can use that to get to a higher place in the Sky Islands. Next, he's on a rail cart, a Zonai-powered rail cart, it seems, in the lava dungeon area location. And he's fighting a Zonai construct in another cart, which is cool on its own, but if you look in the background, you can see those mushroom and tree areas that were in the underground shot, which means that the lava cavern area is connected to other large areas underground. So this could mean a lot of things. It could mean that these underground areas are just huge, just gigantic, and they connect to each other without you ever having to go to the surface. Or it could mean that each one of these areas has several different biomes at once. Or it could mean that it's just this one. Either way, I think it's a very good sign that we see that mushroom forest in the background. It means that at the very least this area is massive. And now this. This just made the whole trailer for me. This is it. We've achieved peak Zelda. Link, in what appears to be Zonai armor, has ultra-handed several stone slabs to make a box thing, attached a little arm to that box, at the end of which is a weapon of some kind. Across from him is a stone talus, and a bunch of bokoblins have used their own crafting ability to build a little fort on top of the talus. So Link and his homemade mech and the bokoblins are charging at each other full steam ahead. You know, this is the kind of thing I might have done as a child with my toys, and I'm just really happy to see it. Next you see Link on top of his horse that has horse armor on apparently, and Link fuses a ruby to his arrow, maybe imbuing it with fire properties, and he's wearing a new armor set that we haven't seen. It's red and black and has horns on it. In the next scene, Link is fighting off a bokoblin encampment, and he shoots some of the Zonai gear that they have there, which causes tons of lasers to start shooting out everywhere. Which makes me realize you can probably attach this to that stone mech that the other Link was using. That guy has no creativity. We can do a lot better than that stone box. Also interesting here is that one of the bokoblins is one of the types we've seen before that has a bunch of stuff on his pack. And he looks like he has a bunch of fire chew jelly, which maybe he can throw at you to cause fire damage. Then we see a shot of you inside of a large tornado with Teba's son, and you get attacked by a large insect leviathan that comes in from the mouth of the tornado. So that's great. Then you see Zelda holding her tear again, and she says, "I know why I am here. It's something only I can do." And in front of her is the Master Sword again in the background, maybe having gotten it from Link in that other location. So when she says, "why I am here," I have to assume that she's talking about back in time. There's a reason she's back there, and there's something important she needs to do there. I don't think she means why I'm here in some random sky island, if for no other reason than right now she seems to be close to the ground. She might still be in that sky island, but before it was raised into the sky. You can clearly see behind her hills and mountains and trees that are at higher elevation than she is currently. Then you see shriveled up Ganondorf, exploding malice everywhere, spawning a bunch of powerful monsters and powering up other monsters. Next it shows the moment where Link's arm and Master Sword are attacked by the malice tendrils. And this moment is still kind of incredible to me lore-wise because this isn't supposed to be happening. This malice stuff is definitely associated with Demise. It comes from Demise, and the Master Sword is specifically crafted to fight off Demise. So there's no reason why this should be working. The malice shouldn't even be able to touch the Master Sword. Even if we get into weird fanfiction-like territory and assume that Ganondorf has the Triforce, and Demise reawakens, and Ganondorf and Demise are the same person, and the Triforce is powering up Demise's powers, and, even if you get into weird fanfiction-like territory like that, it probably still shouldn't work. Because in the old A Link to the Past lore, they stated in the booklet that the Master Sword was crafted also to fight off the power of the Triforce. It was made specifically to fight off a Triforce-wielding Ganondorf. Now, obviously, a lot of that lore is retconned by Skyward Sword. And maybe that makes it irrelevant, but I think it at least shows that in theory, even if it was some crazy dumb thing like Triforce-powered Demise X Ganondorf, the Master Sword should still be effective. It should still work on him. They've had those rules in place before. So assuming it's not going to be something stupid, I'm really interested in knowing why the Master Sword got destroyed. What machinations were in play to allow something like this to happen? Next, you finally get to see Ganondorf properly. And the most interesting thing here is that on his head, instead of his typical Gerudo jewel he has there, he's got one of the Tears of the Kingdom stones. It then shows Link fighting a new enemy we haven't seen before. And then a new character that to me looks like the character that was in the mural, holding hands with the Zonai-looking character. This character is wearing the same recall tier that Zelda had. So first of all, this is not Zelda. There's no chance that this is Zelda. Different skin tone, different facial features, different sized ears, different hairstyle. This is not Zelda. However, I also don't think it's Hylia. I know that's a popular thought right now, but I'm gonna say I don't agree. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's not Hylia. My reason is because Hylia comes from Skyward Sword, and in Skyward Sword, Demise talks about Hylia very briefly. And this is what he said. The goddess lowered herself to a mortal existence to keep me imprisoned. How pathetic. This bag of flesh pales in comparison to the magnificence of her previous form. And he says that while looking at Skyward Sword Zelda. So he's saying a couple things. That this Zelda looks nothing like what Hylia used to look like. That in fact, Hylia in her previous form didn't even have flesh. And this supposed Hylia figure looks rather fleshy to me. Now some might say that this could be a Zelda fusion with Hylia to power her up in some way, but I think that's ridiculous. Zelda is already fused with Hylia. They're already the same person. Zelda is Hylia's avatar. So here's what I think this is. This person is not Zelda, it's not Hylia, it is in fact Zelda. But it's not the Zelda we know. It is a previous Zelda, a previous incarnation of Hylia from a different cycle when the Zonai were around. See, the Zonai seem to already know about the cycle. They're involved in all this in some way. They probably know about Ganondorf. The barbarian armor set that we see in Breath of the Wild has what looks like Ganondorf on its helmet. And supposedly that armor is from Zonai descent. The Zonai motifs are representative of the attributes of the Triforce, so the boar represents power. Which is interesting because the boar also is Ganon's form. The dragons represent courage, and their owls represent wisdom. This is all information released in the Creating a Champion book. So they know about the Triforce, they know about the cycle most likely, they're involved in the events of Tears of the Kingdom in some way, it wouldn't make sense for their civilization not to have a Zelda. And that, I think, is what she is. She is a Zelda from a distant past. Anyway, in the next scene, she blasts a bunch of Moldugas with a giant laser, just decimates them. And then in the next scene, you see Riju using what I guess is Urbosa's Fury, and she seems to have an earring on her that looks like another tier of the kingdom. Then there's Link with a Gerudo, a Goron, and a bunch of Hylian townspeople all armed for battle. And then you see Sidon as a companion as well, fighting off a Zonai construct. Then you see a cutscene with Riju, Sidon, and Teba's son, and Sidon seems to also have a tier of the kingdom, and so does Teba's son. So, Zelda has one, the guy we're assuming that is a Zonai has one, Ganondorf has one, Sidon has one, Riju has one, Teba's son has one, and that accounts for 6 of the 7 tiers that were shown in the mural. We might also assume that the Goron descendant might have one following this trend, which would mean all 7 are accounted for. Next, Link is fighting the 3-headed dragon on a bridge that we saw before. I actually don't know how this fight is going to work, it looks crazy. And again we see Zelda with a repaired Master Sword. Then the trailer pretty much ends and it shows Ganondorf on the right side of the mural, now visible. And finally it shows that scene that I talked about earlier with Zelda next to the altar, next to that circle, asking Link to find her. Now, what's notable is that she seems to be on the ground still. The Sky Islands don't seem to be in the sky yet at this point. I think you can see the jungle region there on the right. And I think that's it. This is just a preliminary viewing. So if I see other people catching stuff that I missed, that I think is important, maybe I'll make another video on it, condense all the things that I find that I didn't see. Until then, though, thank you very much for watching.